Welcome to the Occult Rejects. We are two former secret society members who were determined to show the public the truth that occultism has been purposely integrated into every aspect of society, from politics to music, Hollywood, and science. This is used to manipulate the public as a whole and to protect the fake elite. The symbols are used all around us to affect world events and public perception, our behavior, and even our future. We will translate the occult so that you have eyes to see. We reject their agenda to give you the tools to save yourself.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Occult Rejects with your hosts Lux
and the NY Patriot.
Today we're coming at you with part 2 of the Stephen King series. And probably not, we'll see how it goes. Might be the last episode for this series, but we really enjoyed doing it. There's just so much occultism with all of his books, his background. You know, it's just kind of might want to keep this one short and sweet, you know?
I will have to say I did enjoy reading, because I did reading a lot of his stuff before this, or at least skimmed through a lot of it. And, unfortunately, I think it's you don't want to end up reading a whole fucking book to cover it, or reading it during the show. But I will have to say, just from reading his stuff, and I really don't think unless we spent hours, or at least I did, I wouldn't give it that much. It's not going to give it that much justice. But from reading his stuff, I am totally convinced that he does take occultism and just writes about it, or he takes archetypes, completely writes. Like we were saying before, almost like living tulpas. I really do think just from some of the things that I've read, I've read some of his stuff in the past, wasn't really, into the occultism to really pick out all that shit. But just from going through some of the shorts that I've read now to look into his shit, I was like, damn, I really do think this guy, he really is of the knowing, and he's just writing about occult archetypes. I really do think so. And I'm going to try my best in some of the stuff that I'm showing, but I really do think, if you were to sit there and actually read his shit, you would really see it, in my opinion. You'd be like, okay. I don't even think, what I'm getting at is, we're not even doing it justice, in my opinion. Yeah. There is a lot, I think, in his stuff, for sure. He fucks around with numbers a hell of a lot, too. It's just very weird.
Something that I was thinking about, is, so in the music industry, we see all this crazy symbolism of occult, knowledge. In movies, we see it. So every generation sort of has to have this author who's giving out occult knowledge, right? It's like it's just another medium of media. And so H.P. Lovecraft, right? Think about how many people that influenced. And King, I think, is the same thing. It's to keep the tulpa, the archetypes alive, to put this out as fiction and then tell an occult story in the fiction, which honestly can really influence people when you think about it. You're reading an entire book, and the book is a giant metaphor of an occult principle. That's almost more powerful, in my opinion, than a movie that you just watch and forget about. You got to sit and read.
Yeah.
Take that into your mind. You visualize things in your head when you read. It's way different of an experience. So I think it's probably, maybe just his job to keep the occultism alive in literature.
Very good point. And then, that's another thing he's very well known for, is actually really being able to help you picture something that as you're reading it, that could be powerful.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's that's kind of magic in its sense. Its own sense, really.
Yep.
You're looking down at this book on these letters, and this fucking screen pops up in your head.
Right, and you're visualizing what this person is describing. You're kind of reinforcing the tulpa even by reading it, because it's you know what I mean. It's keeping it alive, because now you have that knowledge of it, or the archetype. Think about a couple of years ago, after It, the new movie It came out. Do you remember what happened that Halloween?
Was that with all the fucking weird clown shit going on? Yeah.
Yep. So it's it's a principle in a book, but you can see it play out in real life too. It's influencing people.
That shit was creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. They were just like standing on the side of roads and shit like that. Remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember actually watching a bunch of videos on YouTube about that shit. Some fucking creepy weird shit.
It was happening in my area too. I was like, I see one of these fucking clowns.
That's great, man. In your fucking area too.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do if I saw some shit like that. Like for me, like if it's to be like fuck, like I guess it depends on the situation. Like you're kind of a dark, secluded place. I think I try to clip like their leg with my car or some shit.
Yeah.
If it's like out and during the day, it's like fuck. What can you really do? I mean, you go up to the dude and fuck him up. You look like the bad guy now.
Yeah.
They're just like standing there doing nothing.
And then I always got this fucking ice cream truck that's coming around my house. It's like right around the time of dusk too. So it's like if I see this fucking clown and an ice cream truck pops up, I'm gonna lose it. Somebody's losing a leg.
Somebody's losing a leg. Oh man! All right, enough of that before we start getting more strikes for inciting violence.
Yeah, really.
At least I think by the time this comes out, or close to it, one of the strikes might be off. So we can afford another one, I guess. Fuck. Oh man! All right, so I do have some just weird stuff that I did find. I thought kind of with his books. Joyland right here, as you can see. Just to me, I mean, I don't know how much he's involved with the art, for the book covers or whatever. But I mean, to me, this is like, you got the redheaded woman with the green dress on. I mean, and she's even got, in my opinion, that camera could even be kind of like, taking a picture, seeing a reflection of yourself. I just think this is kind of like an occult cover, in my opinion.
Well, and all the
Scarlet Horse
carnival circus stuff in the background.
Yep. Yeah, and of course, yeah, it's like carnival sense.
Mm-hmm.
He does have a novella that he released that it was just on Kindle called It's by Ken. Is a novella by Stephen King. It was written exclusively for the Amazon Kindle platform and became available for download on February 12th. 2009. An audiobook edition was released on February 16, 2010 by Simon & Schuster Audio. Read by Hulta Graham. Was collected in King's 2015 collection, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. Heavily revised. I thought that was interesting because there is a Sumeria. It's an important Sumerian city-state in ancient Mesopotamia. I'm sure most people have probably actually heard of that. But in case you didn't, there is a place called When was founded, the Persian Gulf's water level was 2.5 meters higher than today. Is therefore thought to have had marshy surroundings. Irrigation would have been unnecessary. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know if people have seen this before. I know I have. This little statue right here. I've seen that before plenty of times. That actually came from I just thought it was interesting that he does have a book with that name. Night Shift. There's a bunch of different covers for this book, and I think all of them are just fucking weird. And you're gonna see, I think, like kind of a theme with some of them.
The left hand too. It's a left hand.
Yeah. 1, 2, 4, and it's got eight eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be like a representation of 8, maybe for the prince, and he's already the king.
That's what I was thinking. Yep.
Then you have another one, Night Shift, but to me this is emphasizing a hand again, but it's just differently now, So I was just wondering, like, is there even like maybe the hidden hand? Is this insinuating or something?
Oh, it took me a minute to even see it.
Yeah,
like the hand because of the way it's positioned. Yeah.
Then you got this one. Stephen King, Night Shift. You got the upside down pentagram or the goat's head. This even to me, I think, is still the same symbol that's associated with, what was that, Azov, right?
I can't remember.
Yeah, that fucking tri thing.
Oh, the trident. No, yeah, the Ukrainian flag, yeah.
Yeah, the Ukrainian flag. That's what it is. Night Shift is another version of it. fucking upside down pentagram. Here you go again, same thing.
I'm sorry, you're just not going to accidentally put that on a cover, man. I mean, and we've showed dozens of examples of the covers of the books, and again, there's no way he doesn't know what these things mean when he's putting it out. It's not by happenstance, at least in my opinion. There's no way that could happen without him having some type of influence.
And that book was first published February 17th, 1978. So it was on the 17th. I thought that was interesting. February 17th, 1978 was a Friday and was the 48th day of the second month of 1978 in the Gregorian calendar. The next time you can reuse, I thought this was interesting, the 1978 calendar will be in 2023. Both calendars will be exactly the same, and that is a difference of 45 years. I really thought that was all like a little weird.
Oh,
is that the Great Reset?
That's a very good thing to point out, dude. For sure, because it's like, what's the book trying to say then? Is this like some type of anniversary, like an event is going to happen on that day?
Yeah,
in 2023, or
the zodiac
what's
sign
going to happen in 2023.
Even the zodiac sign for that date, it was in Aquarius too. Found that interesting. Salem's Lot, that was just another one that I found that was first published on October 17th. So that was another one that he released on the 17th. Just thought that was interesting. He even has the Mangler, which is, I think, one of the ones I did cover. That is in this book. I just thought it was weird. The 21st Pan Book of Horror Stories. It's a bunch of different authors, but his story is in this book.
Oh, so this is a different one than the one that I showed in episode 1. Remember how he did, it was like a collaboration about secret societies that he had done and the occult principles behind it.
Yeah, and see, in that book that I just showed you, he has the Graveyard Shift and the Mangler are both in that. It's like a book with a whole bunch of different people in it. And Salem's Lot, I just included on October 17th, 1975. That was a Friday as well. Just like the other day, it was a 17th and a Friday. This time it was in Libra. So I just wanted to add those in.
17,000 days ago is what it said.
Oh, I didn't even see that.
Yeah.
And then I did want to just go over, before I cover some of the shorts that I read. I did find it interesting. Now it's really hard, believe it or not, for me to find the exact dates for some of these books. A lot of times you'll go to look them up, and they'll be like published March of 1985, but not the fucking day. And it kind of took like a lot of time for me to go through a lot of his books, and I kind of stopped, I think, like after 30 of them. But I did kind of like find I thought I found something that was, worth mentioning. Most books, from what I got out of and what I looked up on the internet, a lot of times when people do publish books, they normally tend to publish them on Tuesdays, because then it gives like them time to advertise it in the paper before the weekend, hoping that people will actually fucking see it. I guess they assume that if a book comes out and they put it in the newspaper and try to advertise it over the weekend, I guess they don't get as great results. That's what I got out of what I read into with like publishing dates. Because I had started noticing that a lot of his was all Fridays and Mondays, and I'm like, well, are those like normal days to be published? And it's not. It's normally Tuesdays is like a day for some reason for books to be published on. I guess like movies normally come out on like Thursday nights or Fridays. You know what I'm saying? Books have their own day when they normally come out. But a lot of his, Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, Night Shift, The Mist, all Fridays. Dance, Macabre, Dead Zone, Firestarter, Mondays. The Body and Apt Pupil, Friday. Pet Cemetery, Monday. Christine, Friday. Thinner, Monday. Skeleton Crew, Friday. The Bachman books was released on a Friday. It was released on a Friday, and it was also the 17th novel that he's put out. Eyes of the Dragon was released on a Monday. Misery Monday. Nightmare in the Sky Friday. The Dark Hair Friday. 4 past midnight, Monday, the Sundog Monday. So like a fuck ton of all of his books have actually all come out on Fridays and Mondays. And they both are associated with like feminine energy, in my opinion, to an extent. Friday for Netzach or the Venus, and then Monday for the moon, Isis and shit like that.
Moon day.
Yeah. So I did include that. I thought it was maybe something worth bringing up, because a lot of his books, and I think if I would have kept going, I probably would have. I came across more. I was just like, I think this is enough to make my point.
Yeah, and for listeners, if you're saying to yourself, well, why would that be important? It's because if from an occult standpoint, you would want to release your materials on days or hours that you knew could kind of correspond with the book and the occult message. Mm-hmm. Same way that, I would do a ritual on certain days at certain times, because that's when it's the most effective for invoking that energy that you're trying to manifest.
Well, even recording companies do shit like that. They press on certain times and dates and shit. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure it's done with books. Yeah. One of his short stories, I figured I was like, oh, this should be an easy one, because going by the movie. Now, when I had watched The Lawnmower Man as a kid, I thought it was pretty fucking wild. And I had remembered, like, even from then, it was all, like, a lot of AI. And I was, like, thinking, I'm like, fuck, if you think about that movie, that really was kind of, like, saying a lot back then, or, like, really kind of predicted where we are now, in a sense. So I figured, fuck it, that's, like, an easy one. And when I went to go read this, I was actually like, what the fuck? This is nothing like the movie whatsoever. But it ended up working out, I think, and whatever. I think it ended up working out anyway. And I have some things that I took out of it. We're going to go over it. Basically, in this, like, some guy, I think, was obsessed with just, like, keeping his lawn cut. I think, like, the kid or whatever that was doing it for him, something happened. And then one day, like, this dude just basically shows up to cut his grass. And this guy's name is Harold. And I think, I don't know who he's talking to, or maybe he's on the phone. And he's like, to himself, he's like, oh, that's a lawnmower. Harold Pickett asked the kitchen, my God, that's a lawnmower? He rushed through the house and stared out of the front door, and there was nothing out there but a battered green van with the words Pastoral Greenery, Inc. painted on the side. The roaring sound was in the back now. Harold rushed through the house again, burst onto the back porch, and stood froze. It was obscene. It was a travesty. An aged red power mower the fat man had brought in his van was running on its own. No one was pushing it. In fact, no one was within 5 feet of it. It was running at a fever pitch, tearing through the unfortunate grass of Harold Pickett's back lawn like an avenging red devil straight from hell. It screamed and bellowed and farted oily blue smoke in a crazed kind of mechanical madness that made Harold feel ill with terror. The overripe smell of cut grass hung in the air like sour wine. But the lawnmower man was there. But the lawnmower man was the true obscenity. The lawnmower man had removed his clothes, every stitch. They were folded neatly in the empty bird bath that was at the center of the back lawn. Naked and grass-stained, he was crawling along about 5 feet behind the mower, eating the cut grass. This is nothing like the movie. Green juice ran down his chin and dripped onto his pendulous belly, and every time the lawnmower whirled around a corner, he rose and did an odd skipping jump before prostrating himself again. Stop, Harold Pickett, Parkett screamed. Stop that. But the lawnmower man took no notice, and blah, blah, blah. Let me get to the good part. The green hair was even growing on the back, on those buck teeth. He even had, like, hair growing out of his teeth. The guy was, like, totally green. So now, like, to me, I'm like, all right, this might be going towards, like, the Green Man.
Yeah.
So, you fainted, buddy, right, huh? The lawnmower man was bending over him, grinning with his hairy teeth. Oh, you know, and it's wild before this. Before he actually talks to him, he, like, passes out on the front, I think in the front or the back or whatever of his house, and starts to come to a vision of his ex-wife. And it was like, he was like hallucinating his ex-wife. And I just thought that was interesting how, like, I don't know, like we went from him and then like visualizing and hallucinating some female, and now going to the Green Man, who you'll see what happens. You fainted, buddy, right? Huh? The lawnmower man was bending over him, grinning with his hairy teeth. His lips and chin were hairy, too. Everything was hairy and green. The yard stank of grass and gas, too. The yard stank of grass and gas in too sudden silence. Harold bolted up to the sitting position and stared at the dead mower. All the grass had been neatly cut, and there would be no need to rake this job, Harold observed sickly. Well, it is a new thing the boss has been trying. It works out real good, buddy. We're killing two birds with one stone. We're getting along towards the final stage, and we're making money to support our other operations to boot. See what I mean? Of course, every now and then we run into a customer who doesn't understand. Some people got no respect for efficiency, right? But the boss is always agreeable to a sacrifice. Sort of keeps the wheels greased, if you catch me. Harold said nothing. One word kneeled over and over in his mind, and that word was sacrifice. In his mind's eye, he saw the moles spewing out of under the battered red mower. He got up slowly, like a palsy old man. Of course. Sure, buddy. The lawnmower man said, getting ponderously to his feet. Harold noticed an unusually deep split between the first and second toes, as if the feet were well cloven. So now he's telling you that this guy's got cloved feet. It hits everybody kind of hard at first, the lawnmower man said. You'll get used to it. He eyed Harold's portly figure shrewdly. In fact, you might even want to give it a whirl yourself. The boss has always got an eye out for new talent. The boss, Harold repeated faintly. The lawnmower man paused at the bottom of the steps and gazed tolerantly up at Harold. Well, say, buddy, I figured you must have guessed. God bless the grass and all. Fucking weird. Harold shook his head carefully, and the lawnmower man laughed. Pan's the boss. And he did a half hop, half shuffle in the newly cut grass. The lawnmower screamed into life and began to trundle around the house. So now this guy, all green, he's got hooves. He's telling him that Pan's the boss.
Mm-hmm.
Front door crash open. Harold looked around and saw the lawnmower man's mechanized familiar, advancing familiar. That's even something that's kind of used like for like witches too, like they having familiars.
Yeah.
He looked around and saw the lawnmower man's mechanized familiar advancing through the door. Behind it, the lawnmower man himself, still quite naked. With something approaching true insanity, Harold saw the man's pubic hair was a rich, fertile green. He was twirling his baseball cap on one finger. That was a mistake, buddy, the lawnmower man said reproachfully. You should have stuck with God bless the grass. Because I think at this point he's called the cops, and now the guy's like, you shouldn't have fucking done that. You should have just stuck with God bless the grass. And then basically the cops show up and they find the guy dead. So I thought that was weird. The guy talks about Pan. He's all green. He's hopping around, eating the grass. I don't know. Fucking weird. Nothing like the movie.
He's like a comical type figure, too. He's laughing, joking, so it fits the Pan profile. You know, of course, you got the green connection to, like the legend of Pan being associated with the world, right? Like these of the material plane.
Now, you know what that was interesting, too? The Lawnmower Man, the movie itself, even though it was nothing like the book, that did come out before The Matrix, actually, like 7 years prior. So, in my opinion, like it really kind of was ahead of its time, too. And it was like one of the first movies, I think they said, that like really was putting AI in that type of like light of like being a problem. And Stephen King did actually sue the people who made the movie because he said it had nothing to do with his book. And he won. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. But, I mean, the book, yeah, I don't know how you would have made a movie out of that.
And that's, I mean, we talked about that a little bit. It's so confusing for me that you're not going to look at the script before the movie's put out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to say, hey, let me watch this movie that you just made based off of my book. Let me see how it is before you put it out.
Maybe it was just like, fuck it, that's so horrible. I'll let them put it out so I can sue them. But yeah, I did think it was interesting though that movie. I mean, it wasn't based off of really too much of it. I didn't see any similarities, but I mean, it had his name on it, and it did come out before The Matrix, and it really was like kind of like showing, in my opinion, the same thing as The Matrix, because that dude who was in the movie, the lawnmower man, was slow. There was something off, and this guy was basically hooking him up to shit and making him fucking like a genius. So I mean, to me, that was no different than Neo upgrading and learning all that shit. So
that's crazy to me that the movie would be so far off the book. Like what you just described, they have nothing in common. Mm-hmm. A lawnmower, like the book. Does the book ever mention AI?
No, dude. You literally, the only people in that was that guy Harold, the lawnmower man, the chick that he sees in a vision, and then the cop and his partner. It's literally 5 people, and that's it.
Huh.
But he might mention, I think, maybe 1 or 2, like referring to people that were cutting his grass prior. But like that's all there was to that story. I don't even think it might have been fucking 30 pages, the most.
Right.
It was like nothing. That's why I was like, oh, this is an easy one. And when I started reading it, I was like, well, this is nothing about AI, but it's talking about Pan, so I guess this works out.
Weird.
Yeah. Then I covered The Mangler. I had to try to go through this one a little bit faster. It's a short story by Stephen King. It was in Night Shift, so that's why I kind of also wanted to check it out. And the plot summary, when I looked into it, John Hunton, a police detective investigating a sudden rash of grisly deaths caused by an industrial laundry press called a mangle, discovers that a series of unfortunate coincidences involving the machine have inadvertently replicated a demon summoning ritual. Due to various ingredients, including medicine containing extract of nightshade, a live bat, and fresh blood of a virgin getting into the machine, being combined, the machine itself has become possessed by a demon. The story ends after the detective and his friend underestimate the demon's power, and in seeking to exorcise the machine, instead basically gets out of the machine out into the streets. So I was like, that's kind of interesting.
It reminds me of the Ghost in the Machine. Have you ever seen that?
Yes.
Similar.
Yeah. So I did think that something that was interesting that they mentioned in this book is that they do bring up a book called Fraser's Golden Bow. Is replete with them, basically Druid and Aztec lore. It was basically, they do mention a book that I think they're going to use, or that they reference to, that has spells in it. And the book does exist too. The book that he talks about. The Golden Bow. A study in comparative religion, or a study in magic and religion, in its 2nd edition. So he does quote a book that does exist and has to do with magic and religion. Fraser attempted to define the shared elements of religious belief and scientific thought, discussing fertility rites, human sacrifice, the dying god, the scapegoat, and many other symbols and practices whose influences had extended into the 20th century culture. His thesis is that old religions were fertility cults that revolved around the worship and periodic sacrifice of a sacred king. Fraser proposed that mankind progresses from magic through religious belief to scientific thought. So that's kind of a little bit about the guy who wrote the book.
And again, it kind of goes with that theory of what we're saying is keeping the tulpa alive, keeping the occult meaning alive, integrating it into your books and then to the person after who writes another book, and just carries on that message through generations.
And I don't get, like, he just tosses this in. If 700 monkeys typed for 700 years, one of them would turn out the works of Shakespeare. I just thought that was weird how we get into the whole monkey thing in Shakespeare.
Yep.
This I thought was kind of interesting. This afternoon, I fed over 30 recipes for calling demons into the tech computer. So now this guy has like some computer that like he's like running shit through now to like I think figure out like the formula or whatever it was. And I've got basically now he's saying I got a number of common elements, surprisingly few. He's saying that there's horse hoof in there and all this other stuff, but like they're talking about how they're like feeding stuff into like some computer to like figure out like occult, the magic shit. I just thought that was weird. Graveyard dirt. Now at graveyard dirt, and there's all this stuff like, did he have to really know any of this shit? But like some of these things are actually in some books. Like graveyard dirt is used, I know for a fact. Some of the other things you will find in old grimoires. Now I don't know if like people were really using that or if it's code for other shit, but the stuff that he is mentioning, is as silly as it sounds, is like stuff that you would come across in magical spells, especially belladonna.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then they go to try to exercise this thing. They sprinkle holy water on it, and the thing starts like fucking making all sorts of crazy noises, and smoke starts coming out of it. It ends up like sucking somebody in the fucking machine. But basically, they're trying to exercise this machine, and it kills like one or two of the people, and then one of the guys kind of like leaves and runs to the dude that told him what to do. Like a guy gave him the formula of like how to try to exercise the machine, and like you can like smell something like coming through the air. It didn't smell right, and basically they were like. From that, like they knew it like got out into the air. They actually could smell the odor of blood, the ozone. Yeah. There was a faint swelling noise from the east of the house, and the way hunting had come. A steady grinding clatter, growing louder. The living room window stood half open, and now Martin caught a dark smell on the breeze, an odor of ozone or blood. He stood with his hand on the useless telephone as it grew louder. Gnashing and fuming, something in the streets that was hot and steaming. The blood stench filled the room. His hand dropped from the telephone. It was already out. So basically, they fed it, these people, and I guess the blood sacrifice got the demon out of the fucking machine.
I saw one of the person's name was Frowley.
Yeah. 1408, that one again, the movie compared to the book. The book starts off with him there at that place, walking in to get the room. The movie is probably about 20 or 30 minutes at the beginning and the end. That is not in the book. This was a short story that they made of, a whole movie out of. I think both are worth checking out. If you could watch it and read it, definitely fucking Occult, in my opinion. And again, like, unfortunately, unless I really spent a lot of time and probably started ripping shit from the movie that might have actually fit the book, because they don't totally fit either. I could show a lot more, but like it really, in my opinion, like that whole story is all 1408's the total Occult fucking story. Some things I underlined. I don't know if it was just coincidental that he just threw them in there or whatever, but he mentions that he has a lucky Hawaiian shirt that he wears that supposedly is ghost repellent. I don't know, I've always just seems like we've come across Hawaii with Mormons, Shriners, and stuff. So it's like, who knows, like if the Hawaiian shirt's like a reference back to that. The thing that I had noticed that he does a lot in his books, like I mentioned before, I noticed he will use numbers and like almost go in order. And like when he starts describing one of the rooms, he says there was a Persian carpet on the floor, 2 standing lamps that cast a mild yellow light, a desk lamp with a green lozenge-shaped shade, and then he mentions his 3 books. So it's like every time when I noticed that when he does numbers, it would almost go in order. Like he had the 2 lamps, and then when he mentions the number again, now it's 3 books. I don't know if it's just like a way that he writes or something, or if there's something up with that, but I've noticed him do that a lot. Mike could see a faint yellow-orange residue of the sweat on the thin white paper. It did not increase the temptation to light up. Like, this guy always carried a fucking cigarette with him, too, every time he went to go do something. Basically, it's a story about a guy who goes to these haunted places. He doesn't believe they're haunted, but he goes there to cover them. And in case there's a nuclear fallout, he has a cigarette that that he's going to smoke. how had he smoked for almost 20 years, 30 butts a day? There you go again with the 2 and then the 3. I just thought that was weird. Sometimes 40. So now we did 20, 30, 40. It was beyond him. Why he had done it, it was an even better question. Now, I think a lot of times when Olin, that's the guy's name, and he's in the place, I think whenever he puts on his little recorder and that red light comes on, I do think that's almost kind of like showing the sphere of Gabora every time he puts that fucking thing on.
Yeah. Oh man, that tied perfectly into what I'm going to talk about. That's crazy.
Because because he does focus on a lot of colors and a lot of the same ones. Like even I think the orange is neither something to do with Hode or Doth, but we'll get into that. Do you want to say something before I go to the next one?
It would be Gabora too.
Yeah, it could be.
In Asluth, then it would be orange.
Yes. He does mention this lady in this book too. Jane Smiley is an American novelist. She won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction in 1992 of her novel 1,000 Acres. Only reason I even decided to even keep this in there is that she did go and study in Iceland with the Fulbright Scholarship, and we have come across this Fulbright Scholarship, and we covered, I think, that Matrix and Shakespeare shit. Some of those, I think those feminists were through there, and I think she may be her best-selling 1,000 Acres, a story based on William Shakespeare's King Lear. And she also has an essay called Feminine Meets the Free Market. So I just thought it was interesting how she kind of fit a little bit of the people that we came across with the Fulbright Scholarship before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then right here, just in the book, he mentions he had studied with Jane Smiley. So there you go. That's where I pulled her from. Mr. Olin reached into his coat pocket and brought out a key on a long brass paddle. That was another thing, too. This room, which, technically it's 1408, but it is really 1308 because it's the 13th floor. He does, that room doesn't even take the regular cards that we nowadays use because they say it fucks up electronics. So that door still needs a key. Now, is that symbolic in itself? You need a key to open the door.
I think so, definitely.
Yeah. Basically, and also in the story, in the movie, it's, who's that guy who was the bad motherfucker? The guy with the wallet, bad motherfucker from Pulp Fiction. Samuel L. Jackson. He's basically trying to talk the guy out of not going up there. So, 1408, not entered to paying a guest. They haven't had a guest in 20 years. It was just that well that in 1408 has never needed a mag card lock on its door because I am completely positive the device wouldn't work. Digital wristbands don't work in room 1408. Sometimes they run backwards. Sometimes they simply go out, but you can't tell time with one. I even thought that was interesting, that it's like time doesn't exist once you go into this room.
Yeah.
One of the people that has, I think he goes into people that work there, because I think once a week they still do basically 2 women, or they'll get people to run in there and fucking turn the room over anyway. They talked about how one of them went blind. But when she was blind, that she could see the most awful colors. They went away almost as soon as she got through the door. So it's like she walked in and went blind, but then was hallucinating shit. And I just was just is that kind of I don't know, abyss sense in itself, closing your eyes,
or astral travel.
Yeah. And then they mentioned 1910, a leper who had left a wife and 7 children behind. I didn't know if the 7 had anything of significance, but I thought, again, this goes back to the French, and I don't know what the fuck is up with that French shit. But again, he mentions in this book that the only twins that were ever able to really go in and keep cleaning that room and not deal with anything were these French twins called V and C. So, yeah. And I thought this was weird how he just like this like guy's having a weird like I guess like a random thought. Both Abraham Lincoln and John Kennedy had vice presidents named Johnson. The names Lincoln and Kennedy had 7 letters. Both Lincoln and Kennedy have been elected in the years ending in 60. What did all these coincidences prove? Not a darn thing. It's like, yo, what the fuck was that about? Like, is that, I don't know. Like, was he like trying to say something there?
I've heard that fact before. I was like in a museum one time and I heard about them having the same common shit. It's weird. And there's probably some symbolism behind that.
I thought,
yeah. I mean, if you look at like Lincoln, for example, I know this is probably going to hurt a lot of people, but I'll tell you what, Abraham Lincoln was in fact a member of the Fraternitatis Rosicrucis out of Pennsylvania, and they promote it very openly.
Oh, wow. Now, another thing I thought maybe just was, maybe it's coincidental or not, but when they're talking about people who, again, with the so-called natural deaths, 30. Again, that kind of goes with 3. That kind of goes with death in itself.
Yeah.
You know, or 3, exactly. And again, even the room number itself, 1408, it's on the 13th floor, and the numbers do add up to 13, because they just renamed the 13th floor 14th. Strokes, heart attacks, and epileptic seizures were also very huge for people. And I thought that was really interesting. That all has to do with, like, kind of neither the brain or the heart.
Yep.
The power of whatever inhabits the room seems to be less around midday. There was a heating problem on the floor 3 years ago. Massive, and the other people have known somebody died from a massive cerebral hemorrhage. I just thought that was weird that they were going into, like, heart and head shit.
Yeah.
The two things are supposed to connect across.
Exactly, yep.
His stay lasted about 70 minutes, it says, in 1408. And there was 11 minutes of recorded tape in his mini recorder. The bedroom was flooded with a yellow light. You always go on about the yellow light, or then it goes into a yellow-orange coverlet. The guy's, he mentions Orpheus. Gleamed yellow-orange again. Yellow-orange again. He mentions that fucking color a lot.
Orange, yeah.
Yeah, and then on the other table was a dish with a plum on it. I thought maybe that might have been going back to like Saturn or Banana.
Yeah.
Kind of a deep or dark purple.
Yeah,
this isn't a real...
Scarlet.
Yeah, and he starts telling himself, this isn't a real plum. This is a plastic plum.
So fake fruit.
Yeah. But, a single plum sat on a tin plate in the middle of an old plank table. The light falling across the plum and the plate was a feverish yellow-orange. He loves that yellow-orange tinge on everything in this book. His other hand dove as deliberate as fast and dialed 0. As he put the handset of the phone against his ear, he heard a series of clicks as the dial spun back to its original position. It sounded like the wheel on the Wheel of Fortune.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. We've
like
mentioned...
they're trying to say the Wheel of Fortune, like the game show.
Yeah,
what they're really meaning is the Wheel of Fortune Tarot.
Yeah, that's what I think, honestly. Because, again, I think the Wheel of Fortune Tarot is kind of showing you, like, where you're tapping into where you want to go, in a sense, maybe. If you're that, like, that good with it. So, I mean, I could see there's being symbolism for that. Then, like, I think in the movie they show it less, but in the book it does go on more about it, where it does, the phone does start screaming and speaking. This is 9, 9, this is 9, 9, this is 10, 10. We have killed your friends. Every friend is dead now. This is 6, 6. Fucking weird. He swung around at the end of the cord. His stomach was swinging back and forth inside him, and he could still hear the voice rasping out of the black. 18. This is now 18. Take cover when the siren sounds. This is 4, 4. Oh, man. He was not aware of taking the cigarette from behind his ear and putting it in his mouth, or of fumbling the book of matches, with the old-fashioned gold frogged doorman on it. Thought that was maybe interesting that he mentioned.
It's like he's describing how movement in the tree, movement on the
Yes,
tree.
yeah, that's what I really
Between
thought. Yeah.
4, 3, going in sort of order. So maybe it's trying to describe in an occult way as he's talking about these numbers, principles behind where that number would sit on the tree.
Yeah. No, that's why I thought like even sometimes the like the light is for Gabura. Yeah. Because it's just symbolizing him bouncing around. You leave this room, you can never leave this room. 8. This is 8. The door to the bedroom and the door to the hall had begun to collapse downward, widening in the middle and becoming doorways for being possessed of unhallowed shapes. The light began to grow. Again, the room starts filling with that orange-yellow glow. The floor sank into a concave arc, and now he could hear it coming. The dweller in the room behind the room. The thing in the walls. The owner of the buzzing voice. 6, the phone screamed. 6. This is 6. This is goddamn fucking 6.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Basically, and then to really cut it, to get over with it, he does end up like lighting himself on fire. He has a book of matches, and he lights the book of matches on fire and sticks it back into his Hawaiian shirt. And he basically sets himself on fire and then runs out of the room. The one thing he was sure of, but didn't tell any of the reporters because it made no sense. The Burning Man's, now this is the guy who helped put him out, who spoke to whoever after the fact. The Burning Man's screams seemed to grow in volume as if he were a stereo that was being turned up. He was right there in the front of Dearborn, and the pitch of the scream never changed, but the volume most certainly did. It was as if the man were an incredibly loud object that was just arriving here. Dearborn ran down the hall with the full ice bucket in his hand. The Burning Man, it was just his shirt on fire. I saw that right away, he told the reporters. Struck down the door opposite the room, blah, blah, blah. Basically, what stopped it was some man with a bucket of ice throwing his ice on it. That's how it ends. In my opinion, I kind of wondered if that was like a symbol of Aquarius.
Mm-hmm. Putting out the fire.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and it's haunted, Mike said, and if the words had been a talisman, the door of room 1408 slammed fervorously shut, cutting off the light, cutting off the terrible buzz that was almost words. So he even mentions like a talisman with the door.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was it's a very weird story.
Well, definitely. That and the Lawnmower Man are both just bizarre stories. And the writing style is just... It's stuff that's honestly not even scary. It seems like there's a bigger point to the message behind it being scary.
Well, that's what I think. A lot of his stuff, it's almost like a bizarre, like scary or bizarre weird. Because it's probably like, it's like occult writings and it's hard to explain what I'm getting at.
It wouldn't make sense to most people. They would just...
Yeah, it's just like, this is just some weird shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And there are a lot of horror writers out there, and not all of them focus on occultism. But when it comes to King, he always integrates occultism into these stories.
Yeah, and again, like if you were just to go watch 1408 or go even really just skim through the short story, reading everything and like really getting a good picture and seeing it, in my opinion, that whole story is kind of like the guy, like I think he had the chance to cross the abyss and he didn't.
Yeah.
So, he got put out with a bucket of water.
We've talked about this tons and tons of times, but David Lynch, right? I mean, it's clear that David Lynch knows about occultism because he's integrating it into Twin Peaks and stuff like that. There's no way that he doesn't know about these principles. And I think it's the same concept here for King. I think he knows principle, and he's showing you an occult story. There's one on the surface level, one that you read, and then there's one deeper meaning behind it on the occult level.
Yes. All right, so yeah, that's basically everything that I had.
So I'm going to be talking about the book It. And of course, there are two movies where, one's a TV show, and then the other is an actual motion picture. But so this book has got so much occultism inside of, like, the way that the book and story is structured. I think it's telling a very detailed story of crossing the abyss and things entering into our dimension from neighboring dimensions and influencing Malkuth, or the kingdom here on Earth. And yeah, this one is a very long read, of course, but thankfully I had read this book a bunch. Kind of was a fan of King back in the day.
Oh, I love this shit. I love the movies. But now I'm realizing that not all of them are really that close to the book.
So when I looked into the published date of it came up September 15th, 1986. Now, you had mentioned earlier that you said it was, I think you said it was a Friday.
Yeah, down. Yeah, the movie I had wrote down. Sorry, my bad.
Well, what's funny though is that if that was released on a Friday, if you look back at September 15th.
Oh no, sorry, my bad. Yeah, 9/15. That was a Monday, but it's a Monday. It's a Monday. It's his 17th novel.
Yeah. So it's just like you said, either Friday or Monday, one of those 2 days. So, it is the main antagonist in Stephen King's 1986 horror novel. The character is an ancient trans-dimensional evil entity which preys upon the children and sometimes adults of Derry, Maine, roughly every 27 years. That's an important number to remember. We're going to get to that later. It uses a variety of powers that include the ability to shape shift, manipulate reality, and go unnoticed by adults. It primarily appears as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. And King states in a 2013 interview that he came up with the idea for Pennywise after asking himself what would scare children the most, more than anything in the world, and feeling that the answer was clowns. Now, we've already covered this tons of times. Everything from Royal Order of the Jesters to Gacy.
I really think I don't know who came up with the design of Pennywise, but it is very close, I think, to one of the clowns Gacy has even painted.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think you might be right. I think he might have even actually painted Pennywise at some point.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, when we covered him and we showed some of the paintings he did, in my opinion, one of them looked a lot like Pennywise.
Yeah. And all the carnival stuff. You just showed the book where it had the circus symbolism in the background.
Joyland too, yeah.
Everything we even covered with QAnon and the connection to clown world.
Shriners and clowns, circus.
Shriners and this is a very important occult concept that's being shown to people. The clown is, you're hiding your face. You can be whatever you want to be. It's sort of making a jest or a laugh at the world around you, because the way that they talk about it in Royal Order of the Jesters is that this is all just a game. The world and life is a game. It's one giant play, and so you should just be a clown and do whatever you want. So it's something that comes up a ton, and I think that this book reinforces that concept.
Oh, yeah.
So also interesting that it says King thought of a troll like the one in the children's tale, Three Billy Goats Gruff. Which, if you look at that, to me, like three billy goats, they're under a bridge. You got to.
This guy's sticking his head out from the sewer.
Yeah, like you got to be right. You got to be able to answer these 3 questions by the Billy Goats to be able to cross over the bridge, or, in my opinion, the abyss, or having all 3 things combined. That's the representation. And we're going to see a lot of similarities between it and the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, wow.
Reinforces the same concept of the mind, the heart, and the will have to be combined in order for you to cross the abyss and move through the wheel of fortune. So Pennywise, is described as a mysterious, eldritch, demonic entity of evil.
Nice.
It is a monster of unknown origin that preys on Derry's children and humans every 27 years, stating it finds the fear in children akin to salt on meat. Among its powers is shape-shifting in a form that includes fear while killing the victim, normally assuming the role of a middle-aged man dressed in a clown costume. So we know that before he kills his victims, he appears to what their greatest fear is. So if someone's really afraid of a werewolf, it will appear as that. And then once it invokes fear, then it devours these children or adults and stuff. So see a lot of the similarity of, again, like what do we hear all about with the adrenochrome stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like when these rituals were creating fear in order to increase like the value of blood or like what you would do in a ritual.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Well, they say that it's like kind of part of, I guess, the theorizing behind like the traumatizing the children and stuff is it releases something into their blood, right?
Right.
Makes it
and
of
again,
more value.
This was written in 86, so before a lot of people had heard about that, I think it just could be another occult archetype that he's talking about in the book.
Mm-hmm. He was talking about adrenochrome before conspiracy theorists. So.
Right. And this also really reminds me, and we'll get to that a little bit more in a second, but you always see the shape-shifting stuff and clown symbolism, which is like the jesters, but a lot of the descriptions of it reminds me of skinwalkers. So in the novel, it is a shape-shifting monster who usually takes the form of Pennywise the Dancing Clown, originating in a void containing and surrounding the universe, a place referred to in the novel as the Macroverse. It arrived on Earth during an asteroid impact and made its home under the land which Derry would be built on, initially preying on indigenous tribes. It was asleep for millions of years. Then when humans appeared in Derry, it awoke, began feeding a cycle lasting about a year, feeding on people's fears, often assuming the shape of what its prey feared the most, and then entering hibernation for 27 to 30 years. It can manipulate people with weaker wills, making them indifferent to the horrific events that unfold, or even serve as accomplices. So more of like, and that's another theme we see over and over again in King's stuff. They were always referring to Indian tribes.
Yeah, even in Pet Cemetery.
Yep.
That's where they're burying the Micmac. They're burying the animals on like Micmac land.
Now, didn't you say that you found out that the Micmacs were like native to Utah or something?
Yeah, they were like another, I think, kind of like a group of people that were around that area with like the Utes and the Navajo. Yes, and they do have, in my opinion, I mean, they got their own medicine wheel, but I mean, when I looked them up, they did have a symbol that I have seen used on a magic book. So I thought that was interesting. That some of the Micmac stuff, I don't know who, the chicken or the egg, which one came first, neither the occultists or the Indians, but I have seen a symbol that is synonymous with them, and I've seen it on a fucking Denning and Phillips, I think. I forgot the name of it. Magic or some shit like that. Some like big magic book that they have. Same fucking symbol.
Yep. So you take Skinwalker, for example. They're claiming that there's this entity that comes through a portal or whatever and shape shifts into whatever. And, the tribes around Utah, they have all these different lore and folklore about this shape-shifting Skinwalker. To me, this is exactly the same story. It's being told in a novel from 1986. So, definitely.
Well, it's even interesting too. Thinking about it now, we're talking about. I mean, and I guess actually after this, it would be the other series. Well, it's kind of a short series. We have it with a two-part thing with Native Americans. I mean, if you go back to it, I mean, when you guys see part one of that, there's going to be a lot of clown symbolism, actually, that the kid shows, and justice symbolism with Native Americans.
Right.
So, like, as you were even talking about that and then mentioning the indigenous tribes, I'm like, well, how far off is the clown from the Indians, really?
Right, because they would have all of their different, the tribal leaders or like medicine men. Wouldn't they dress up in some type of like a costume that resembled a clown?
Yeah. Or Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice.
Yeah. So I find that interesting.
Story.
Yeah,
same story. It's just weird because this is so, it was like 1986 before anybody was talking about what was going on at Skinwalker or all this other occult stuff that we've been talking about. Yeah, predates a lot of shit, and I'm just wondering if it's him communicating the archetype of what a Skinwalker, this shape-shifting demonic entity is.
Yeah.
So, but it will appear to you with whatever you're most afraid of. And one of them that's important here is that Pennywise often will be in the form of a flesh-eating bird. Quetzalcoatl much?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So in one of the events, Eddie is hospitalized. This is one of the characters by Bowers and several of his friends. Beverly witnessed one of the bullies. So there's like in the story, there's these two groups of kids. You have like the losers club and then sort of like the bullies that are always trying to attack them. And what ends up happening is, so at the end of part one of the book or the TV series, the kids, they attempt to kill Pennywise the clown by performing a ritual. And they come up with the idea of using a silver bullet that can wound Pennywise the clown. That's how they attempt to do it while doing this this ritual, which I think once we get to that, there'll be no doubt that there's some deep occult symbolism here. They also swear a blood oath. And in the sewers, while performing this ritual of Chud, an attempt to face it in the macroverse, the alternate universe where it is from, where he meets the monsters, an ancient turtle that created the universe. Bill learns that it can only be defeated during a battle of wills, and see its true form from the quote-unquote dead lights. Before Bill defeats the monster with Martarin's help, after the battle, not knowing if they had killed it or not, the losers get lost in the sewers before Beverly, which is it's the female character for the Losers Club, has sex with each one of the boys to bring back unity to the group. And then they do a blood oath that swears if it ever resurfaces, they will go back to Derry to try and kill it again. Damn. So in order to defeat this demonic entity from another universe that comes here every 27 years and then hibernates, eats all these kids, the only way to defeat it is with this ritual. And then after they get done this ritual, we'll get into more details about the ritual and how they do it in a little bit. It's so crazy. But after that, they have sex. They all have sex with Beverly.
Yeah, I don't remember that in the movie.
Yeah, I don't remember that in the movie either.
Well, I mean, because it's a good thing.
But to me, and I'll talk more about it, I think that Beverly is representing the Scarlet Whore or Banah. I think this is a giant allegory of moving from Gabora to Banah.
Well, you know what I thought was interesting, and I'll just add this in real quick, and then let you keep going. The 27, you know, like I've even looked into that, because you know how like you have like a lot of those musicians that all died at 27. People are like, oh, what's up with that 27? The 27th path on the Tree of Life is actually the path between Hod and Netzach. Yes. And technically, I mean, I guess if you cross that, you would go to Tiferet, and that could possibly, when you start to, I guess, you know, maybe start channeling, or you can really start heading up the tree and going out. And that is also the Tower card, which is technically the 17th, even though it says 16 because there's a 0. That is the 17th card itself, too.
Dude, exactly.
And I mean, I'm just seeing it on here. I see the 27-year-long hibernation, you know, and you mentioned 27 before as well.
That's the same thing I thought, man. And I picked that up, and I started to get some shit together for Path 27. And it's eerie how similar it is to this story and the movement, how this story replicates the movements on the tree, you know?
Nice. That's great.
So let's talk about Gabora for a second for people who are wondering some more details about Gabora. So Gabora would be on the left-hand side of the Tree of Life. It is the pillar of severity. And Gabora, even in the Golden Dawn, they will tell you that Gabora is one of the most unknown spheres on the tree, that there's a lot of mystery around Gabora. And Gabora can be positive, but it can also be negative. And when taken to the extreme in a negative form, it is a very dangerous sphere. So I'll go ahead and read a quick description of what Gabora is and how it ties to this story. So Gabora would be severity, harsh, or judgment. It is the 5th Sephiroth on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life and the center of the pillar of severity. It is also called Pashat, meaning fear. Okay? So when pushed to the extreme, it's representing fear. And some of the representations of Gabora are a fiery serpent, just like we saw about it being appearing as a
flesh-eating bird.
Flesh-eating bird flying, trying to eat people. Think about how that relates back to what we've talked about in other series with Quetzalcoatl having the same description. But it is represented by the pentagram, and it really, when pushed to the extreme, is all about fear. Now, this entity, right? It's coming from another dimension. It's invoking fear before it consumes or destroys its victims. And to me, this is just a giant metaphor for Gabora and movement up the tree. So something else interesting about how it could be tied to to Gabora, is that it is pictured with this white face, red nose, red hair. And, you find all of those things for Gabora in their certain colors, right? So in Bria, Gabora would be red. In Yetzirah, Gabora would be bright scarlet. In Azia, it would be red flecked with black. So all of those colors are all represented right there too for it, simply just by looking at his face.
I even wonder if that type of metal is even associated with Mars.
Which one?
I'm trying to think of what these things might be made out of, like this steel grate or whatever. But
oh yeah,
there's I wonder if that's even kind of in itself kind of showing Gabora in a sense, because I think the metal associated.
Yep.
Maybe I could be wrong.
And the way that the whole story starts is that after a giant flood, okay, where there's so much rain that the town can't handle it. To me, that's talking about the influx of the watery essence of Bana moving down to Gabor. So it's like talking about how Gabora is moving down into our dimension in this movie, and then it's accompanied with water. He's living in a sewer. It was where he first appears in the movie, and he tells the Georgie, the kid, to come down to the sewer because they all float down there. To me, it's again another representation of crossing the abyss, using people's fears to feed off of their fear, and then making sure that they don't get to cross the abyss because they're lacking one of the different important things that you would need to cross the abyss successfully. So the heart, the mind, and the will. You'll see as you look on that each one of these different characters in the book, these kids, it's very similar to Wizard of Oz. They all have a different thing that they're lacking. One of them is will. One of them is, will or being strong or courageous. Some of them are missing intelligence or the mind, and others are lacking emotion or the heart.
Oh.
So it can shapeshift. The group also finds out that it is from the Himalayas, called the Telius, or skin changer, skin walker.
Yeah.
Mike has seen it take the form of a giant bird.
That even almost sounds like another type of Native American thing, a giant bird, thunderbird.
Yeah. Yep. So each one of these characters, like I said, is lacking one of these characteristics that make them whole. Again, the physical, the heart, the mind, and the will. And you can pause it here if you want to read the breakdown for each one of these characters and how they have a different background, but they're all missing something. That's why they have to come together as a team, because they all have something that the other lacks. So without each other, they're fucked, right? But in their own self, they also are fucked because they're lacking one of these traits that could possibly allow them to cross the abyss, being a whole person. So let's do them.
I'm wondering if some of these kids even represent like the spheres themselves, and like coming together would like make Tifereth,
Yep. That's a really good point, right? Like it could be representing the spheres as well.
Yeah.
The archetypes for each one of the spheres that they're saying in the book as kids.
Yeah.
So they learn that the way that they're going to kill it is with this ritual of Chud, and in which the attacker, so this is the way that you do the ritual. The key to sending it away for good is by performing the ritual of Chud, in which the attacker bites down on his or her tongue, silence of Bana, promoting it to bite its own. The attacker then tells jokes. If the attacker laughs first, it earns the right to kill. If it laughs first, it must go away. Through a combination of this ritual, and as well as Beverly's insistence that the boys make love to her to solidify the strength of their circle, the user or the loser club succeeds in sending it away, but not killing it.
Fucking weird.
So more of that, like the biting down of the tongue, silence of Bana, the gestures, the telling of the joke, right? The first one to break character loses. As children, Bill, one of the characters, is the only one to engage with it, being thrust towards the macroverse, heading towards the deadlights, but his physical body remains put. He speeds by the turtle, who only offers advice that you must help yourself, son, and that you've got to thrust your fists against the posts and still insist you see the ghosts. To me, that first part right there is talking about you must help yourself, son. You must balance the mind, the heart, and the will. And, it's further explained here. You've got to thrust your fist against the post. Both the posts, sides of the tree of life, right? and still insists you see the ghost. So it's bringing all three together: mind, heart, and the will. Combination of the three, or the three pillars on the tree. After it's already referencing that you have to put your hands or your fists on the two, which would be the pillar of severity,
and pillar of mercy, yeah.
Pillar of mercy, yeah.
Then he even talks about engages with it telepathically, biting his tongue again.
Bill, so he communicates telepathically. I mean, it's the movies, in my opinion. The one that just came out, I think, has a ton of just obvious occultism. Like, if you just watch the movie, you'll be able to see. You don't have to be like an expert in occultism to see but they say a lot of weird things that aren't necessarily in the book. They say in the movie too, so definitely check it out. So again, here you got Beverly. So after they do this ritual, this is the girl that they all have sex with to solidify.
She's got a fucking key on too.
Got a key on, and it's like you said, dude. I think it's the combination of each one of the spheres, or a metaphor to how to pass through Mana, through the abyss. And of course, she has to have red hair. Scarlet Horde. She's got to have.
I mean, that's kind of green too. Red and the green.
The red shirt.
It's really just it's another version of Joyland right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So one of the quotes from Pennywise is, "For 27 years I dreamt of you, I craved you." So after part one of the book or the movie, after they do this ritual of Chud, they agree to come back in 27 years if it ever reappears. Well, it's sure as shit he does, of course, right? But the 27 years is very important, like NY said earlier, because it's correlating to path number 27 on the tree, which would be Hod to Netzach. God saw the swimming of the waters, and the air was good. I'm reading now from, this is Kabbalah by Tim Debopoulos. It joins the opposing poles of intellect and direction in Hod and the emotion and energy in Netzach. It is the home of speech and meaning, the force that drives the abstract to seek materialization. So we see that over and over again in the book. What people think is manifested. What their greatest fear is manifested. It manifests himself to whatever their greatest fear is. This manifestation process and the combination of, Hod and Netzach.
Yeah. That's bugged out.
Yeah. So I'm convinced 100% that it's just an allegory showing movement up the tree.
Yeah.
And what's needed to get to other spheres, and what you lack, what you might need to work on. It says, Pennywise also says, "I'll take him, I'll take all of you, and I'll feast on your flesh as I feed on your fears." Common denominator here is that fear stops the combination of the heart, the mind, and the will to move forward up onto the tree. That's why it always is trying to invoke fear in its victims, because it's trying to keep those fears making its victims like trapped on Malkuth.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, oh yeah, you're handcuffed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's I could almost see this as like kind of like showing somebody trying to go up the tree and then they get knocked back down. It's because of this motherfucker.
Yep. Or like, whatever this is, like if it is supposed to be a real entity, and that's what King is talking about, similar to like the Skinwalker lore or whatever, or if it's a giant metaphor, it's still showing you that fear is what keeps you trapped here.
Okay.
Over and over and over again. It's the
Tasty.
whole thing is about fear. that's the reason, that's the motivating factor for Pennywise, is that he enjoys the fear. So he's sort of like, again, representing Gabora, making sure that you don't cross to where you want to go, using fear as the mechanism to keep you anchored here. So, of course, we got here one of the scenes from the movie, which would be it with the inverted red triangle of balloons covering his face. Obviously a goal, but I thought that was
well, again, that would really obvious. I mean, that would really be reaffirming everything you were saying too about him. I mean, since it's pointing down, I would assume it's kind of like showing like the Gabora forcing itself down the tree.
Yep, and what you fear the most, right? Yeah. That keeps you from combining those things will keep you trapped here.
Yes.
And interesting thing about it, right? So in the second movie, it has a lazy eye. Which one of the eyes is lazy? The left eye.
Lazy left eye.
Yep. So he's got these red balloons, again, more symbolism of Gabora. And there's always symbolism of water.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, I just realized it now. I don't want to forget. When you eventually in the OTO you get a red patch that points down, and they say that the red patch and the pointing down red triangles to symbolize the sight of Horus.
Oh.
Which would go with Gabora too.
Yeah. I mean, it's always got this water always surrounding it. He first appears in water. It even dies. It dies eventually. It's near water. Everything is
back to the abyss,
revolving around water. Yeah, through the abyss, and just the little things in the symbolism of it, like again saying, he's got red hair, this lazy left eye. All of those are clues to show you what archetype that king is talking about. It's a clown-like figure, just very similar to Pan, this or Mirth, right? Like that we covered.
Mirth, yeah. Very, they're two totally different looks, but I mean, very jokester, like Loki-like too.
Yeah.
Like fucking with people, taunting them.
Right. And he does that a lot in the movies. It's just like taunting them before he kills them, But ultimately, what I think this is this book is showing that what you fear, it exposes what you lack mentally, physically, and emotionally. The same thing that was shown in The Wizard of Oz with the lack of heart, the lack of the mind, and the lack of will, right? In order to get to the Emerald City, right? It's the same story that's being told here, that in order for you to get up the tree to the Emerald City, or to be free of this plane, you have to combine your mind and your heart, so that your logic isn't too overpowering your emotions, and your emotions aren't too overpowering your logic. And that, combining those two together, the mind and the heart, and finally putting on the final touch, which is the will to move upwards on the tree. I think that's what this entire story is about.
And I just realized now too, fucking when we were talking about Tiferet during the Kabbalah series, I mean, again, that goes back to a symbol for that could be a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
So... Again, are all these kids trying to, are they showing you like the balance that they're, something like that?
Yep. Or the things like the fears or that are created when you're a kid, when you're supposed to be innocent, and then you carry those things for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the movie, when they go back to Derry after 27 years, they still have the same issues. They still have the same problems. It's just they've grown up, but they're even worse now. So it's showing, like the things that you pick up as a kid, they ultimately will stay with you for life and keeping you from becoming a whole person. So, yeah, wild to me, man.
Yeah, that got deep.
And then I even started thinking about, like, you were talking about copper or brass. I'm sorry, brass. How it's always mentioned with the keys,
Mm.
and like that you had talked about in the other books, these brass keys. And the clown's name is Pennywise.
Oh, well, it's copper, but it's copper and brass both go for Netsock too.
Yeah. Well, and brass and copper are pretty much the same exact thing. They just have a different, I believe it's a different lead content that changes it from brass to copper, but they're the same thing pretty much. So thought that was interesting. His name's Pennywise. So he's wise of the brass and the copper.
Well, and the 27 again would fit that. I mean, that is it's including Netsock and Hode, so that would be copper and mercury to an extent.
Yeah. So crazy story, man. I definitely think that that's what this is. Just a big old allegory.
Yeah.
And people just think it's like scary story about a clown, but it's saying something way deeper. And that's honestly doing this, the research for this book, convinced me that King knows deeply about occultism. And it's not something that, oh, well, in the Tommyknockers, they mentioned some ritual. No, that's a far stretch. But when you look at this story and the occult principles that it's explaining, I am convinced King knows way more about the esoteric subjects.
Yeah,
just being about a book about clowns.
You know what? And you know what? I think, which was something I would have liked to have covered, but it was a huge book, and I was worried about how accurate the book was to the show. But, I mean, he even has a book based on living under a dome. And it's very, I mean, even
really?
Under the Dome. It's called Under the Dome. I mean, the show itself is a cult as fuck. But I didn't even try looking at the book. But if it's anything like the book, I mean, I would even say that's between both of these. Just between those two books, I would assume this guy knows what the fuck's going on.
Yeah. Yep. Then you got other ones like Cujo and shit, which I haven't looked into much, but I'm sure, like, if you read that, maybe there's stuff in it, but it seems just more or less like a book about a crazy-ass dog.
Yeah.
So you got, like, some books like that, but then you have these books, which are showing occult, meaning behind it.
Yes.
So that's all I have for episode 2. And, hopefully people listening will be able to see where we're coming from with that,
Oh, definitely. Well, yeah, I think you definitely showed it better than I did.
Well, it's funny, man, because we both shared the stuff that we were both going to reference too.
Yeah, that's wild.
Like the 27 and the path.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something up with that 27. It's like right before you hit Tiferet and can channel out, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah. And what is it? The very first interaction that it has with Georgie, the kid, is a boat. And it captures the boat from Georgie, and that's how he's able to lure Georgie down into the sewer, is by come and get your boat, right? It's like same occult story of crossing the abyss of, Anubis. I mean, countless other shit.
Oh yeah, even taking the boat across the river of Styx and shit.
Yep.
Charon.
Mm-hmm. Crossing over to the abyss to the Scarlet Whore,
Down. That was fun.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to yours. Oh man, that was good, Lux.
It's crazy.
I was sitting here the whole time, just like fucking watching it. I was like, "Oh, this is interesting shit."
It really is. It's pretty remarkable to me to see how deeply occult this is.
Yeah. And I think it's a great. I think it's a great one to use because like it just has like you got clowns in there. That's just it's weird in itself, like you said, and then you got mentions indigenous people, Native Americans. It's just I feel like there's so many little things,
connections. Yeah. Yep. So I'm not going to say that I'm a fan of King. I'm not promoting his books, but to me, this I don't think that the message here that's being told, even though it's a scary book, I don't think it's a necessarily a bad principle that he's trying to show. It's, kind of putting into this metaphor of what we all lack in order for us to become whole, to move to the spheres that we want to on the tree out of this dimension or this reality. But most people just wouldn't see it. They'll just think it's a movie or a book about a scary clown. So I don't think that the principle he's explaining is necessarily bad, but I think that he knows way more than he's being forthright about.
Oh yeah, I definitely think he is of the knowing.
Yeah,
for sure. Just like you said, he was just a different David Lynch, like you said.
Yep.
I think that's a really good way to put it. Actually, he's just an artist putting occultism ideas or writing off of occult archetypes, producing art with it, I guess, in a sense.
Yep.
Very, very well done, Lux.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah, for sure.
You as well, my friend.
Thank you. So yeah, I guess that rounds up. This will probably end, or like you said, I think this is probably the last one. If it is coming up after this, I think it is actually, it kind of works out well. We do have a guest coming on that covered Native American and kind of occultism, and we'll go into clowns and jesters and weird looking shit like that. So
yep,
that's a good follow up for the ending with this, actually.
I know, especially all the stuff we've been looking into and researching. When I started to look at this book for the series, I was like, whoa, this ties into pretty much everything we've talked about in the last couple of months.
Yeah. Well, when we even decided to cover this, I had just assumed. I think I even said to you, I was like, I assume you're gonna cover it, right? Because I knew you've mentioned it before, and it is really a great example to use. Yeah. So very well done. So that is the end of our Stephen King series. I hope you guys all enjoyed that. I thought it was interesting. It was definitely not like Lux was saying he's promoting his stuff, but in my opinion, even if the shorts that I covered, or 1408 or well, that's a long book, but I I think if you were to at least maybe watch the stuff or skim through it yourself, you would I think you would see the occult picture being painted. It's really hard, I think, to kind of cover everything, because you'd have to read the whole fucking story. But the guy definitely has, I think it's peppered all inside of his stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's probably our biggest point of even covering Stephen King, is it's another example among the countless other examples that we've showed that this stuff is being put into the public and it influences us. So you're getting influenced by occult principles that you might not even be aware of, and it's important to know aspects of the occult so that you're able to see it for your own eyes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you can maybe see the story for what it is, instead of I think the problem is that when people are, I guess, ignorant to occultism, and are not using the word ignorant in a bad way, just don't understand it, you can start taking stuff that you see the wrong way, and then that can start maybe planting thoughts or ideas in your head that make you think certain ways. Before you know it, it's you just misunderstood something and took it the completely wrong way. Not saying that's what he's trying. You're not saying that's what he's trying to do. It's just that, unfortunately, I think most people don't really understand what the fuck's in front of their face.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, this honestly could be a reason why he's so well known, is because other readers and other artists and other people understand what the fuck he's writing about.
True. Very true, yeah. He is the king, after all.
There you go. He's the king sitting on his throne.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what would that be? That'd be a chess head, right? I think when king's sitting on his throne.
Yeah, with
the magical image, I think. Yeah. And 4 minutes to midnight, or four after midnight? Well, I don't know. I have noticed him reference fours a lot too, so that would go along with chess.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So that is the end of another Occult Rejects series. Like I said, after this we do have a Native American series that I think will be pretty fucking mind-blowing, actually. Me and Lux, I know the first part, we've recorded the first part already. The second part, we're recording next week. Me and Lux are both like, holy fuck. Me and you were like, yo, this has really intrigued us. Check out that, because again, like, I think more clown stuff and really weird and occult. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And yeah, check out all our links in the bottom. Lux's show, my show, The Occult Rejects, The Element Chat, and knock on wood, our YouTube's still going. Check that out. And yeah, until the next one, everybody be well. Later.